All right, gang. Welcome to the weekly Mac Forum video chat for Sunday, January 17th, 2016. Hope you enjoyed this evening's show. Might be a little short. Got a few tips and tricks as usual. Forum roundup coming up, and just a little bit of Mac news here and there. Hope you find it helpful information. First of all, I want to welcome our newest member, Rusty Gorma. As of about a half hour or so, he was our newest member of the forum. Welcome, man. If you've been lurking the forum, please be sure that you join if you want to ask a question. Remember, it's free to join. You don't need to be a member to lurk and look up answers, but you do need to be a member if you want to ask a question. It doesn't help much to post in the contact us area of the forum, since that's only seen by the moderation team, and that's a relatively small number of people compared to the total membership. So be sure you check that out. Post in the become a member and post with your questions. You might find a lot of answers, a lot of questions already answered on the forum. Give it a good search. That's always a helpful thing. Given that, let's get right into some of the Mac information we have for the evening. First of all, I want to point out that iOS 9.3 is not out yet to the public, but it has been seeded to developers. The public betas have not come out yet, but the developer release has. And unlike some of the other releases in the past, this release, if everything that's currently in it stays in it, will include some new features. In the past, that's not been true of the betas. Generally, they save some of these features for major release changes. But some of the things that have been reported, and I've got a link to Apple's iOS 9.3 preview page, as well as a link to some information from Cult of Mac about what's coming up. First of all, another change to the Notes application is going to be, because it's an application that you use all the time and for a variety of information, you can now secure notes that such as if you've got financial details, medical info, website login, with either a password or a fingerprint. And you can also sort notes by date created, date modified, or alphabetically. And I like that option. So some changes coming to the Notes application. I use that quite a bit, especially here recently. So it's going to be nice to have those features added. There's going to be some improvements to the News application, personalizing things even more than they have in the past. You're going to see more health-related apps and more information in your dashboard for health-related things. And there's also some changes in CarPlay. Have more useful features, especially if you're tied in with Apple Music. A lot of information based on your preferences will be right there on screen for you to see. That one doesn't help me much because my car doesn't support CarPlay, but for those of you that have it, it's going to be, looks like it'll be interesting. For me, I'm kind of curious about a feature that they have in there now that's going to be a 9.3. I'm going to I think, playing around with the beta just to see how this goes. Something geared toward technology in the classroom. If you are using an iPad in the classroom, one of the things that you have not been able to do in the past is to have multiple students have separate profiles on the same iPad. This separate profiles, separate data. This would be similar. On the Mac, you can have one Mac with multiple user accounts. Each user account has its own preferences, its own settings, etc. You cannot easily do that on the iPad. You really you can't do that as fully as you could on the computer. There are going to be some changes to that in the educational setting that would allow you to set up a roster of people who are going to use an iPad, each with the same settings, with different settings, preferences, etc., etc., etc. This would make it easier for sharing iPads in educational situations. I've been hoping for this for some time, something like this for a long time. I use my iPad from time to time in the classroom, and one of the things that I wanted to do in the past, I have applications on there that are geared toward preschool kids, applications towards junior high, and even some that might be geared as far as high school. It would be nice to be able to set up different profiles based on age, so that my high school kids don't have to sort through the preschool apps. My elementary kids would not see apps that are more appropriate for high school age, and this is not a function necessarily of keeping them out of inappropriate apps, but cutting down on the clutter, because using anyone who's using an iPad in the classroom will tell you that even using the folder function doesn't help, because some kids are going to explore even those apps that are a little bit more difficult for them. So this is something that I've been kind of curious about and hoping they had for a while. And the reason that I'm hoping I would personally like to see them extend this even to the home edition and not be tied to education. Because given the cost of the iPad, I could see some families where they have several people sharing an iPad. And let's say you have 2 or 3 children, different age groups, sharing the same iPad. Even though you're a home user, because you're sharing the iPad, you might want each of your children to have a different use profile, so that the youngest of the group only sees those things that you deemed are appropriate for them. The older kids would see things that are appropriate for them, and then you, as the adult, would have perhaps some things that you don't necessarily want the kids into, all on the same iPad. Right now, the closest you could come to that is to turn off access to certain applications. And I can tell you from experience, I've done that before, where, for example, I don't want my students accessing the email program on the iPad, on my personal iPad, because it's linked to my email account. So I've shut that off where they can't get at it. I want to be able to have some control over when they can and cannot access the internet for various things. And the problem with that is, and I've had this happen before, I've literally locked myself out of my own iPad before, because at one point during the school day, I changed my password just because I knew that I'd had the same password for several days, and I usually change it rather frequently to make sure the students have not acquired the password. And I locked myself out of my own iPad. I've had that happen twice now. This would, I think, cut down on that if used appropriate. As I say, I'd like to see that extend to home user. I think it's a good feature. It should have been in there a while ago. So keep an eye out for that. One of the other things that I saw that I think is interesting is something called night shift. And night shift is the ability, what they're going to start doing is based on the time settings and your location, shifting the colors of the OS. There's a lot of research, for example, that says that the bright blues and things in that color range help to keep you awake, whereas looking at things with warmer colors in the evening as you're approaching bedtime will kind of cut down on that and not keep you awake as much. So night switch is going to be a function where, based on location and time, it would shift the display toward these warmer colors in the evening as you're approaching bedtime, and then go back to the cooler colors, the blues, etc., during the daytime. That's a good idea. I like it, except I do hope that you have some control over it in terms of perhaps an override. Because, for example, if you work nights, you might want your iPad to be in the cooler mode to help keep you more active and alert, whereas you would have the warmer colors in the daytime when presumably you're moving toward getting some rest. So hopefully they'll have some leeway and latitude on that. Another thing that's going to be included, and this might be the reason it's been speculated that this is the reason that new features were added into the 9.3 beta for developers, and that is the ability now to pair more than one watch with the same iPhone. And so if you have an Apple Watch, in the past you've been able to do a one-to-one pairing where you have one iPhone paired to one watch. Well, that's great, but what do you do if you're the kind of person that you've splurged and maybe got the sports version of the Apple Watch and the dressier version of the Apple Watch, and you kind of switch them out based on what you're doing? It's nice to be able to pair both of those watches to the same phone, and there's been some speculation that that's why this feature was added. If that is the case, I think that's a good idea. That's a perfectly good reason to add this feature. So we'll see. I'm going to be keeping an eye on that. I've signed in for the public betas of iOS 9, so I'll be keeping an eye out for some of these things. I haven't done the developer beta program. There's really no need for it. I'm not a developer by any stretch of the imagination. The closest I've come to my own development is some basic brute force kind of Apple scripting and automated scripting in OS 10, and some Excel scripts that I did years ago and would rather not discuss anymore. It was an ongoing multi-year nightmare. Anyway, that's a story for another night. That's a good overview of some of the things that are coming up in the iOS 9.3 release. No, I haven't seen anything yet about timeline for it, final release. May be a while since it hasn't gone completely through beta yet. The developer beta is just recently, I think just this week, released. So it may be a little while. Another thing I stumbled on this week is there are some pretty interesting wallpapers on part of a sub-site in the Apple site. As part of their Start Something ad campaign. These are some of these are some pretty good looking wallpapers. If you've got one of the Retina display Macs, you've got those 4K and 5K machines, the iMacs. Some of these are some really good looking wallpapers. I have some, and they should work on some of the, if you've got the newer phones with the higher resolution, they should work on there as well. I've got a link to that in the show notes. Some of them are really good. Stumbled upon those one day, probably forgot about them, and then saw the link to them again in the Cult of Mac over the last few days. So that's something to keep in mind. Also from Cult of Mac, you've heard me reference some of Rob Lefebvre's writings as well. And Rob has some interesting thoughts on using VLC to play video on the Apple TV. Now keep in mind, what Rob is talking about here is if you have the Apple TV 4, this is the one, the most recently released. It's got the Siri remote that uses voice. And one of the things that it has is the ability to store applications on the Apple TV. It doesn't have storage for media like your own video and things like that. But Rob points out that VLC has a player out for the Apple TV, and it will play video. So he has some thoughts on how to use it effectively for the Apple TV. Many of you are already familiar with VLC from the Mac side as being a video player that will play dang near any kind of format. And so this might be a good one to have on your Apple TV. And he gets around, Rob gets around the fact that you don't have video storage on the Apple TV. One way to do that was to set up something like Plex or some of the other media serving programs that exist for the Mac. Point your Apple TV to that media folder, and then you can use the VLC app on the Apple TV to play things. Unfortunately, I can't run that version of VLC on the Apple TV. I would be curious to see what their interface is like. Interface is about my only complaint with the Mac version of VLC. It just, it drives me nuts. It needs no insult to the people that wrote it, because sometimes it really handles some files that nothing else that I have will handle. But just the interface just puts me over the edge. I can't explain why. A lot of people love it. I love what it can do. I just wish there's something about it that just pushes me over the edge. And hopefully the Apple TV version has a little bit different interface. But yeah, I've got a link to Rob's comments and his tips in the show notes. I think you'll enjoy that. I can't test that series of tips because I don't have the Apple TV 4 yet. And no, that's not a good excuse to go out and buy one, unfortunately. But along that note, my buddy Kirk McLaren, Kirk the iTunes guy, I don't think I've referenced this yet. Stumbled on this. It's in this week's email blast. I don't think I've referenced this article before, although we might have referenced something similar. Kirk has a link to a Macworld article that discusses digital audio and in terms of file formats, compression, um, settings, etc., etc., etc. I gave it a cursory glance earlier this afternoon as I was putting the show notes together. One of the things I like about it is that it seems to give you a good overview of relevant information without bogging you down in too much of the detail and just useless information. He seems to focus mainly on the information that you need and do it in a very clear, coherent, cogent manner. I like reading Kirk's comments about digital audio. He's if you've never read some of his material, I suggest you check out his site. He is both keenly interested in audio quality, keenly interested in the digital side of things, and is careful to make a distinction between what true audiophiles may need and what the average user may need, and do it in a way that doesn't insult the quote-unquote average user. I mean, he understands that not everyone is going to want to sink obscene sums of money into gear just to play back audio. And in fact, has mentioned a couple of times, if I'm not mistaken, that there are times when sinking that money into gear does not get you the quality of playback that you would expect. So that's something to keep in mind and keep an eye on. Of course, we have that there for you. Thought you would find it interesting. It's one of the many things that I've linked to of his in recent weeks, and included in there are information about the bit rate, how changing bit rates affects file size and sound quality. There's a little bit of a discussion about what is referred to as high resolution audio, which codec compression methods are referred to as lossy and which ones are lossless, and why you should care. And as I say, the whole thing is done in a way that I think even a casual follower of digital music will be able to understand what he's getting at. It's a relatively short article. It was posted to the Macworld site January 12th, 2016, 5 a.m. in the morning, or as I like to call it, obscene o'clock in the morning. So those of you that follow Kirk regularly, enjoy that one. As usual, there's a lot of other good information in his Macworld column and on his iTunes related website. And that really is one of the things, is pretty much most of the things that I wanted to discuss in any depth tonight. I know it's a little bit shorter show than it usually is, but that's okay. We won't waste too much more time on things that are irrelevant. On the forum, we have a continuing discussion, a thread related to whether removing the 3.5 millimeter iPhone headphone jack from iPhones and iPads would be a good idea. I can see both sides of it. Removing it puts the music into an entirely digital realm. but that's a good thing. But the downside, there are a couple of downsides to it. Number one, there are a number of users, myself included, who already have one or more headphones, etc., or other accessories that plug into that jack. So that would mean using those would mean getting hold of some kind of adapter that ran through the lightning port. Certainly, you can get headsets that work Bluetooth, and as Bluetooth improves, I'm moving more in that direction simply because of getting tangled in the wire from typical wired headsets. But the other downside to getting rid of the 3.5 millimeter jack is as you run more things through the lightning port, then the question becomes, will you start seeing failures with that lightning? Will the failure rate of the lightning port go up? I think you will start to see, especially once this change, if this change comes about, and I think it probably will. I don't think the question is if it comes about. I think the question is when, and it might come with the iPhone 7. Unlike some people, I don't think this change is driven primarily by a desire to make the iPhone thinner. I think that may be a consideration. I think it's the other issues of being able to go all digital. It's one less circuit that you have to build, the whole bit. But we have an ongoing discussion about that, whether it's a good idea, what users will think. You may find that interesting. As usual, we have multiple threads on the ins and outs of running Windows on the Mac through Boot Camp, through some of the virtual machine software and the like, as well as a bunch of other tips and tricks. So stop in during the week and check it out. That's going to just about do it for this week. That's about all the tips and tricks that we had lined up for the show tonight. So I want to thank you for taking the time to listen in. And until next week, this is your host, Sly Dude. You'll find me on the forum during the week. Feel free to ask any questions. If you have a suggestion about improving the show, put it. There is a thread in the specifically for the Mac Forum Sunday Chat Show. Put it in that thread, and I'll take a look at it. I'm certainly willing to take a look at any ideas that you might have. And until next week, we'll see you in the forum. Thanks for joining us, guys.